All right, we should be recording now. All right. Last time we talked about bevel and emboss primarily, and a little bit about the stroke and about drop shadow, but this time we're going to go through several of the other ones. And I'm going to start with, I'm going to use basically three different kinds of pictures to kind of bring this home to help you understand how this works. We're going to start with the stroke again. I just kind of briefly went through the stroke last time. So we're going to review it again just to go through those other parts that we didn't talk about. So again, you can either double click over here on the layer, which is what I normally do, or you can click on the layer styles button down here, or you can go up here to layer and then layer styles in here somewhere, which I always have trouble finding because I never use it. So my shortcut, I always just double click here and it opens all the layer styles. So we're going to talk about the stroke this time. And one thing I wanted to point out is that any of these things over here that have a plus by them means that you can add additional. So I can have 2, 3, 4 different strokes on this one image if I wanted to. So if you notice here, I've got overlay down here twice because I've used it a couple of times. If you get here and you want to clean up things, you want to get rid of that, you can just click on the trash can and it'll go away. So I just wanted to kind of point that out, that you can have multiples, but only of those that have pluses beside them. So on the stroke, we talked about this before, but I wanted to get to kind of a deep dive here. So the size here, this is the structure, and it's almost all about structure and just a little bit about the fill type here in regard to color when we're filling the stroke with the color. So size is just the number of pixels. As you can see, as I get bigger, you can see that the stroke gets bigger. So I mean, that's a no-brainer there as to how that works. The position, inside, outside, center, pretty self-explanatory. Is the stroke on the inside of the object? Is it on the outside of the object? If it's centered on the object, you have half on the outside and half on the inside. And we'll show you that in just a second. The blend mode, of course, means that you're blending this color using that blend mode onto the object. So at the moment, we're using screen to blend this yellow onto this blue. You see just a very small, faint bit of a stroke there. And I'll go ahead and make that a little bigger so you can see it, and maybe even zoom in here. So you've got this kind of a stroke, and yellow blended with blue using screen yields this kind of a color. So again, pretty simple, straightforward, no-brainer. Opacity, as I bring it up, it becomes darker, and even darker here. It becomes almost white when you blend yellow with blue. So if I go to the outside, then it blends yellow with the green on the outside, and you still get this kind of a yellow color. If I go to center, you can barely see because there's not much of a difference. I've used a different color. You can kind of see that on the inside it's a very faint kind of a bluish color, and the outside it's more yellow. So there's not much difference in regard to that. So that's kind of, again, pretty easy to get. Now this overprint is something that I didn't talk about last time. Overprint, if you think of overprint, is kind of like painting over it. It doesn't blend it all the way through, it just paints over it and blends with the color that it's on top of. So in other words, if I have overprint turned on, which I do here, the inside will blend yellow with blue, the outside blends yellow with green. If I change this to be inside, it's going to blend everything yellow with blue. If I go outside, it's going to blend everything yellow with green. So if I change that overprint, it really makes a bigger difference whenever you're doing center. If you look at that, I'm going to change this color so it's a little more obvious. Blue, but let's go to red. Or dark red. There we go, I hope. And we'll go to color dodge. Maybe that'll help. So I have center. No, it doesn't really help because it looks like, okay, so it's painted over that with the same color. It's painted over, overprint will paint over the blue with blue and the yellow on the green. So overprint just kind of makes a difference of how it blends. If I turn that off, it blends everything with color dodge. If I turn it on, it's separated like that. So I never really use overprint, but it's basically saying I'm going to paint over it rather than blend it. So if you think about that, it blends with one color instead of two colors, really is what it's doing. So overprint, and we're going to turn that off because I really don't ever use it, but you can keep that in mind that it makes a difference in there as to how it blends. The other type of fill type is a gradient, for example. And when you click on gradient, then you have all these other things to worry about. So now we don't have the red blending anymore. We have black to white. And if we zoom out here, you can see that we have white on top and it blends down to black at the bottom, which is what this is. And it's because it's linear and it's at 90 degrees. So at the top we have the white, at the bottom we have the black. The way it blends with color dodge, I can take it down a little bit so it blends a little bit differently, but it's better if you see it that way probably. And I can change that to outside. Makes a little bit of a difference, but not really. So if I change this to a different direction, you can see in the picture over here what it's trying to do. It wants all the white side to be on the right and all the dark side to be on the left, which is what we have here. So you have, as in regard to a linear, you have this right here that you can turn around to decide how you want this stroke to look with this gradient. So if we think about that, I can also click on the reverse, which basically turns it around. And then we have this align with layer. What that means is that if I have this, if I come around here, I can move this gradient just by clicking on it. Well, you can't really see it because it is linear. Here we go. Okay, anyway, what we have here is this align with layer. If you move your gradient around, which is not being really, that's okay. You really can't see anything because it's linear the way it is, but align with layer, if you click that, it will align it back the way it was to begin with. So it'll align it back as a linear gradient on here. We'll do it again in a minute when I change the kind of gradient that we have. Reset alignment will also reset it back to the way it was. Align with layer basically it initially aligns it with the layer, and then you can move it around and then resets the alignment back to the way it was. Dither, you notice on a lot of your gradients you have a dither checkbox. Basically what that does is it helps guard against banding. A lot of time you've probably seen some gradients before where they've had a lot of banding in it. If you click on the dither button, it tries to help with that banding. The scale button, or the scale slider, basically changes the scale. If you notice down here how it's a little bit, if I change the scale down, that kind of goes away. So it's just how much of that gradient do you want to show. It's not real obvious on a stroke like this. Then you have, oh, and you can also click reverse. I think I did that, where it reverses the opposite direction. We also have radial. Radial is not going to show up because it's from inside out. So it's dark in the middle to white on the outside. So everything here is white. So you're not going to really see anything here. Maybe we can move that one around. No, that one doesn't move around either. Okay, but that's radial. Like I said, it really doesn't work with a circle like this. We have angle. And angles just kind of has an angle that goes around like this. You can see in the picture over here what it's trying to accomplish. Again, I don't use any of these. If you want to reverse it, you reverse it the opposite direction. Another one is reflected. Now, I use reflected a lot with text, but reflected just means that you've got white here, white at the bottom, black on the right, black on the left. So that's the way it works. You can reverse and turn it the opposite direction. So diamond, again, is kind of like radial. It starts in the middle and radiates out. You really can't see it here because it would be radiating out in this direction. But one down here that I thought was kind of cool was the shape burst. The shape burst basically puts a little gradient around your object. So if I increase the size here, it's going to create a gradient like this, and it looks kind of like, if you had the right colors, it could look like a solar eclipse or something like that. So it's kind of cool. Again, it's on the outside. The opacity is at 78% in this case. You could turn it down to less opacity if you wanted. But it's kind of cool to, you know, if you needed something like that. And so shape burst is pretty interesting. If you click reverse, it does it in reverse, which is kind of weird. And again, the angle of it, in this case, since it's a circle, it doesn't really matter. Everything's bursting out from it. Scale could be up here. Doesn't really make any difference. So anyway, the gradients with a stroke, I had never thought about using gradient with a stroke, but the shape burst I thought was kind of cool. So if I came in here just to kind of show it and created a rectangle, and then maybe fill it with another color like red, and then do the same thing. Go to stroke, and there we go. There's the shape burst around this. So it's dependent on the shape itself as to how it will radiate around it. So I thought that was pretty cool. And that is color dodge. You can change that to get a different kind of a look, you know, for depending on what you want. Soft light gives you kind of weird. So linear burn, different things like that. I just thought that was kind of cool to show you. So let's use this same thing and let's look at text. So we have text here, and we're going to choose stroke, and usually think of stroke as being this little line around it. We're going to change it back to color so you can see, and this is red with linear burn, turns out to be black basically. So you know, with the blend mode, the color, sometimes it doesn't make any difference. It just makes it black. Linear burn is one of these darkened modes. So if you changed it from linear burn to screen, it's going to be more like a gray color. So it's a screen of red on top of this. See, this is outside, so it's on top of the green. So red on top of the green at 21% winds up being a little bit of a gray color. If I bring it up here, oops, that's size. I thought that was opacity. More opacity, it really doesn't matter. So bring it down. So it winds up being kind of a gray color. Just get in there so you can see it. And if I change that to, you know, a different color, wouldn't want it to be green. You can try a blue color maybe. And use color dodge. It just turns out being kind of a blue. So a little bit of playing around with this, with you know, understanding how these things work. Maybe this is lighter color. There we go. So now you get kind of a blue on there that you can see pretty well. Linear dodge and opacity at 88%. So that's kind of the way I think of using stroke most of the time, but I'm thinking more outside the box now with it because the other things that you can do, such as we can go back to gradient. Now with gradient, again, you don't have much here unless you increase the size. So we're going to increase the size here, something like that. And we have a shape burst, just like we did with the circle and the box on the other one. So that's kind of cool the way it does that. Now, if you wanted to, you could put another stroke and put it on the inside and have a kind of a cool looking set of letters for that. What you could also do, let's just try doing some other things. Linear. See, here's the way that gradient works. It's light to black, and black on top of linear dodge is going to be basically blank, not much there. And the white down here is going to show through. So these things, you know, that's why I don't use these very much, because I don't find real helpful. But you could play with this, and it might be something that winds up being the coolest thing to use. So we can try inside. You get a little bit different. This basically doesn't have a stroke because of the way the gradient works. You can increase the scale, which means more gradient or less gradient, and it really doesn't matter in this case. So anyway, again, we have the reverse. I can reverse it, and now they're over here. Or I can turn it back the way it was, and it just moves it around. Again, let's see if I can move. Should be able to move this, and it's not moving. Well, okay. You should be able to move that around. Maybe it's just the inner shadow, inner globe. I thought you could move this around too, so that it looks a little different. And I know with the pattern, which is here, that we didn't talk about on the other one, you can also create a pattern for your stroke as well, which seems kind of silly to me, but some people may think it's great. So now we have this pattern of these dots around here. And if you zoom in, you can see these patterns. Yes? No? Okay. I was sure you, yeah, see now I'm moving these patterns around. You can see I'm moving a little bit. And all that does is it kind of moves the dots around. If you had a certain kind of pattern on there, then you could say snap to origin, and it brings it back to the original way that it was. So there are patterns in here like these bricks, and you put these bricks in here, and now I can take these bricks and move them around. See how they move around there? And if I go, I really screwed that up. So you just hit return to origin, it brings it back to the way it was. So that's what that is. And it's the same kind of thing over here on gradient with the aligned layer and reset alignment. I just couldn't figure out why it's not working. So anyway, I use it so little, and especially the patterns here, you use so very little. And the cool thing is you got these bricks here. Well, I can take them and turn them at an angle. And now the bricks are going this way. So, and then you can change the scale if I want the bricks to be really big, like that. Or if I want the bricks to be really little, like that. So you can have these kind of different size. Now the link with layers is kind of like whenever you have a mask linked with your layer. If you unclick that little link in between the two, you can move your image around and leave the mask the way it is. It's the same kind of thing here. If I have this turned off, then I can move this around and the pattern stays the same. If I leave it clicked, then when I move this around, then the pattern goes with it. So for example, it's clicked right now. So if I take my move tool and move this around, you can see it move and the pattern doesn't move. If I go back and turn that off, And now I move this, pattern is staying the way it was. You can see that the pattern, it's kind of jumpy. The pattern did not move with it. I have a different pattern behind it now than I had before. So if I have that linked, the pattern will stay with it. Okay, right there. So pretty simple. Like I said, I tend to stick with color for the stroke, but I've grown to appreciate the shape burst and maybe using it down the road because it looks pretty cool. So now, what about an image? This is an extraction that I did. I shot this girl 2019 March, something like that. This is not her, the background. I extracted her and put her on this background just for the use here. I've got a composite with her in it. It's probably going to be posted in the next week or so. And so this is not a very clean cutout, so excuse me for that, but it is going to work for my example. You can even use a stroke like this. So if I double click, and if you noticed, she is a little bit backlit. Now, she is actually colored for the composite that I'm using, and where it has some front lighting and some glow. So she's got a little bit of a yellow tint to her for that purpose. So she's not quite perfect for this, but I think you'll be able to catch on to what I'm trying to do here. So she's kind of backlit, so I want to have a little bit of a fringe around her so that she looks like she's got a little bit of light coming in. So I can click on stroke, and first of all, this is not what we want. So we're going to take the gradient and we're going to go back to color, and then we're going to go to much smaller size, and we're going to go to a color that is in here. I'm going to try one of these colors down here. Okay, and now we've got this stroke around her. Well, that stroke's pretty strong. I want it to be an inside stroke. I can actually make it more like 2 pixels. It's probably more like what I want. I may want to increase it here in a second. Opacity can go down. It's got a little bit of a purple tinge to it because it's blending this yellow in with the background. So it's a little bit too strong. Bring it on down here, and I've got something like this. And that's a little bit too purple, too pink. I want a little bit of yellow in there, so I'm going to try to get something that is a little bit stronger. And I don't think any of the darken modes are going to work because they just make everything dark. So I'm going to try to use screen, and screen is a little bit of blue as well. So what I can do is I can pick something that's really yellow in here and try to make it blend more yellow. Let's see. Yeah, that's a little bit more orange. We'll try that. It's still a little bit blue in there, but you get the idea. I can come in here and bring up the opacity a little bit. So now I have this color in here that's behind her. There still needs to be more yellow. Sorry. So I could even go to normal if I wanted to and try to bring that back to give me a little bit more of a yellow color. So the idea is to add just a little bit of a outline on her. Now, obviously the hair looks horrible, but I'm looking mainly at this over here. So now that I've got that, I can come in here and I can get rid of most of that over there and all of this over here. So how do I do that? Well, remember, if we do a mask here, and I come in here and say, I want to mask off all of this stuff up here on top, what is it going to do? It's going to just push that down. That's all it's doing. So that's not going to work. Plus it gets rid of her. So remember what we had in here last time, or actually the time before last, in blending options, we have this thing called layer mask hides effects. If we check that, that's going to allow us to remove the layer mask. The problem here is if I remove the layer mask, I'm removing her too. So the trick to this is to make another copy of her, and down here get rid of this and get rid of this so that I have the original there. And now I can come in here and delete the stroke where I want to delete it. So I can come up here in the hair and say I want to do 30% off here. Just do a little bit of reduction there. And kind of leave a little bit to blend in, and come over here, and then I can get rid of all of it over here. Kind of a weird thing there. So now I've come in here and I've removed the effect, all of it on her right side, because the light's coming from the right side. And it's hitting her over here. Well, I need to also remove it from under here and right here, so that it's just hitting her a little bit in the hair. That's still not very good, but you get the idea. And then on the shoulder here. So this is kind of a way, and it's also all the way down her dress here. If I can find my cursor, all the way down her dress here, so that you have a little bit of a halo there. So that's one way to use the stroke. Now, obviously you can see here, there's a lot more to it than just doing that. You have to kind of play with those colors because you're using blending modes to get the colors to come in the way you want them. Excuse me. Need a drink of wine, I think. Okay. So that is the stroke. And that was all I wanted to say about the stroke. Do we have any questions or suggestions or thoughts about using the stroke? Does that make sense, what I said? I went over kind of fast.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about the next thing, which is the inner shadow. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start over. Actually, I'll get rid of this box too. And now we have an inner shadow. So inner shadow is a lot like you probably would think. It's kind of like the, you'll find out that it's kind of like the inner glow. They're very close to being the same thing. But what we have here is, again, the structure area at the top and then the quality area. And what you're going to have here is pretty much the same thing we had with the other thing on the bevel and emboss that we talked about last time. And most of the things that we're talking about, blend mode, opacity, and then some adjustments to those. So we're going to change this to be, I don't know, we can't make it green, we'll make it yellow. See what we get. Opacity, you just increase that, makes it a lot more evident. The distance is going to bring it out more. And now I did that first instead of the angle because I want you to see how the angle works. The angle is, it's going to show where the shadow is coming in. Now the shadow, you'll find out, actually goes all the way around, but most of it is going to be in the direction of your angle. If I turn this over this way, then now the shadow comes from this side. I mean, you know, makes a lot of sense, right? So the distance is going to be how far out do you want that to be. The choke is going to be how defined do you want that edge, and then the size is going to be basically making that edge a lot more gradient. So that's really all there is to doing an inner shadow. You just want to play with it till you get what you want. And this looks kind of cool that you have, this kind of a shadow. And you just kind of play with the choke. The choke again is going to make it more definitive there, like that. It's going to make the color a lot deeper along that edge. If I keep going, it's going to make it more and more like that. The choke, come back here. The distance, or the size, I mean, is going to be how big of a gradient you have. If I bring it back, it's going to be a smaller gradient. If I bring it this way, it's going to be a bigger gradient. The distance is how far away from the edge that works. So I usually will push the distance out here and push the size up a little bit. And that's basically it on that. Now the quality, this is the exact same thing that we talked about last time. I typically like to have the linear ones, but like this one or this one or this one, these kind that basically show what I'm looking for. And again, if you look at these, they're just a curve. So if you wanted to, you could come in here and play around with these and make your own and do, see if you can get something you like better. And then you would save it to a new name. Again, I typically just kind of leave it here unless I'm looking for something special, unless it's just, I want to try to do something different and that's not there. And in that case, I can still come here and I may want to come and push this up and maybe push this down a little bit. That makes it a lot less, strong in the color. I could also reverse it, grab this and bring it, sorry, my mouse was button up against my computer there, and then bring this down, and basically it reverses what you had. So, I mean, you can play with that. Now you have the light side in and the dark side out. So, if that's all these are, is they're just a bunch of curves that handle your inner shadow. So that's pretty much it. It has, global light, just like the others. And everybody remembers global light just basically means that everything I use on this particular file now is, if I have that checked, anything that has anything to do with light is going to follow whatever I set here. So if I make this 77%, everything's going to be 77%, or excuse me, degrees. So that's pretty much it there. If we go to text and play with it over there, let me get rid of these effects for the stroke. And we can play with the inner shadow over here as well. So again, now we have yellow on yellow, so that doesn't quite make sense. So we're going to come in here and let's try a funky green and maybe have a green inner shadow, even though we have an outer area of green. So I have inner shadow coming down at 90%. The distance is there. The choke, they should have something, and I don't see anything. It's probably, because that's a light color. It needs to be a dark color. And there we go. So now we have some green coming in here like this. So this is an inner shadow for letters. Now that looks kind of weird. So you might want to take the distance down a little bit. Maybe the size up. Get a little bit more like that. Here we go. So now you kind of have a shadow coming over the top. And again, this is 90 degrees, so you don't have any shadow here. You don't have any shadow down here, but you have a lot along here. So if I take this now and move it to 0 or somewhere close to 0, now it's going to be on the right side and give you kind of a shadow. So maybe instead of green, maybe you want to go with a darker color and use maybe a dark green like that, and you get that. Or you could even go and select this and have a shadow using that, using multiply, maybe even color burn. Ooh, color burn doesn't do much. Linear burn, there we go. So now you have an inner shadow using that. Again, you can play with this. Now this one also has noise. I didn't mention that a minute ago, but if you wanted to, let's scroll in here, you can see it's got 6% noise. You can see a little bit of noise in there. And that just kind of adds, I think, to the shadow. So you could make it 0 without any noise, and it would look very smooth. But I think adding just a tiny bit of noise gives it a little bit of credibility. So we have that. Okay. And let's try with her. So we're going to take this and throw it away. And we'll be back to where we were. And we're going to try inner shadow. And to me, this is where inner shadow or inner glow really are going to make a lot more sense here. Now I've got the angle at -31 because it kind of looks to me like the light is coming from this direction. And I have a pink color across there. So let's see what kind of glow she has on her. So now she has that color of a glow on her, and on her arm this way. Nothing on the inside here because the light's coming from this direction. And she has a little bit right here too. So this works much better for me than the stroke does. So if you took this just as it is and did it a before and after, you can see the difference that it makes right there. So it adds a little bit of credibility to your image. Now, I know you guys are mostly landscape photographers, and you probably don't do really much cut and pasting, but if you wanted to add a tree or something like that, this is a great way to give it a little bit more credibility, is to add a little bit of a glow wherever the light is coming from. So I didn't even do anything to this one, but you could change the size to make it a little bit bigger of a glow, and now we've got more coming in. And the choke is down to 0. I could make that choke a little bit like that, and it makes it a little bit further away. Distance comes in, so now you've got probably too much, but let's see. If you turn it off and on, it's really everywhere. But it kind of adds, so if I were to back out and turn it on and off, so it kind of adds to giving her a little bit of a glow coming from there. Okay. Let's see. Did I miss anything? Okay. It's got 6% noise, and you can just play with these and play with the color for whatever. And that's inner shadow. Going through this really quick, guys. Any questions on that? Another drink of wine and we'll move on.
Hey, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
You remember her name?
Oh man, I just had it. Jennifer Granato.
She looks a lot like somebody I used to know, an actor, but the last time I saw her was 20 years ago. She wouldn't look like that anymore.
Now she, this is the only shoot I ever, that I've done with her, and she was out there. This was the big fabric shoot I did with Eddie and his group. Out at the harbor, and her and Victoria Hubner was there as well.
Yeah.
I shot them both. So
she's in that group then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she actually, I was on her, shared with her on Instagram, and I saw where she had left the country to go do something with animals down in Puerto Rico or Costa Rica or somewhere down there. And then I think she's back. So anyway, I don't know if she's doing any more modeling or not, but she was awesome in this shoot.
So do you use this shadow thing a lot, or, I mean, is this something you use frequently, or were you just like using this to show us how it can be used?
Well, this is something that I definitely use this inner shadow. I mean, it's something that can, like I said, it really adds credibility to your images.
Okay.
haven't used it a lot, but I do use it whenever I need to put a glow. And she actually was shot at the harbor, and the sun was behind her, so there is a glow behind her. But I'm using her on a composite where she doesn't have any light behind her. It's all in front of her. So that's why she's colored yellow like this.
Okay.
So it depends on where the light is and what I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, most of the time you like to shoot these people with the light in the right direction. So whenever you put them in a composite, you put them in a composite with the light in the right direction.
Right.
But there are a lot of the tricks out there that you can do to kind of, you know, make it look like you have the light right to begin with. And this is one of them.
Okay.
Okay. All right, well, let's go to inner glow. And inner glow is much like inner shadow, like I said. If we go to inner glow, then the difference in inner glow and inner shadow is that inner glow doesn't have an angle. It's all the way around. So your inner glow is going to affect everything. And if I wanted to use this, which I could on that image back there with the girl, I would have to then go in and erase it on the side where it shouldn't be. But in images like this or in text, it really is pretty cool. So again, you have your structure area up here, and I'm using screen with pink. And you can also use a gradient if you want to. I typically don't use the gradient, but you could. You can add a little bit of noise. And you have a technique which is softer or precise. And precise means that it's not gradated at all. There's no gradient at all. And softer means that you have a gradient. So basically that's the difference. And you have center. Center means that it comes from the center. And edge means that it comes from the edge. Pretty straightforward. So if I take the size and move it up, you're going to see that glow get bigger. And again, the choke just makes it a little bit more defined. See how it becomes a much harder edge there? There's not as much gradation there. So if I bring the choke back down, it becomes more gradation, bring the size back up, and it's a little bit softer there in the gradation. So if I go to change it to center, it goes from the center out, just like I said. It's kind of like a reverse that you've seen on the other ones, and edge brings it in from the edge. So bring that choke down a little further. Now you have something like this. So this looks a little bit like that, the stroke with the shape, whatever it's called, shape scatter or whatever, where it looked like a solar eclipse. In this case, it's kind of inside, but it's kind of the same kind of look. Again, you have contours where you can change it to different things like this. You get all kinds of weird stuff here, but you know, if this is not the look you're going for, which is what I usually do, is, well, what do the other looks look like? And then I come in here and start playing around with them. But typically, again, it's more the linear ones that I use. You have anti-alias, which basically means to get rid of the artifacts that are around it whenever you do something that's gradated like that. Range is kind of like size in that it adjusts that. So I'm not sure why you have both size and range. Jitter only works if you're using the gradient, but it's the same thing as adding noise. So if you have a gradient and you push jitter up, you're going to see more noise in there. So if you look at it here, you've got a little bit of noise in there. If I take the noise up here, now you've got a lot of noise in there that you can see. So it's basically, I usually like to have, like I said before, just a little bit in there. This is 8%. It's not too bad. It kind of helps with the gradation, I think. And the jitter, you can see it going back and forth. It doesn't do anything because we're using the color instead of the gradient. So it's identical basically to inner shadow, except that it goes around the entire object. So if I did the same thing again, like I did earlier, with a box, there's a rectangle in here, and fill it with a color. I'll just use red again. And then, by the way, you can copy these if you press Option, and you can drag it up here and copy it, and it will just copy the same thing. So again, you get the same kind of a inner glow in this rectangle. Okay. So with text, throw away the inner shadow, and you'll see the inner glow look almost the same way. Let's see. We have softer and precise. Again, we'll go with edge, and we'll go with softer, just to choke up a little bit in size. And I'm going to have to change this to linear burn, I think. Here we go. So you can see what's going on now. That's kind of funny because we're using this pink color, and this pink color on top of this yellow with linear burn turns out to be a dark yellow color. So it's kind of interesting. And the opacity at 79%, it's got a little bit of noise. And if I change that to precise, oh, you don't see much change. Well, it's more the glow is kind of right here. If I take the size down, it's kind of hard to see with yellow on yellow. Let me see if I can change that color a little bit. There we go. More of a brownish look. So bring the size down. You can see now we've got a bit of an inner glow there. And that's precise. If I change that to soft, it gives you a much softer look. It's much smaller. So if you want to make it a little bit bigger, you just push that out a little bit to get a little bit more of a glow in there. So again, remember, and this is the hardest part of showing you this really, is that the blend mode is going to blend with the color you have here, and it depends on both of those and the color that you're blending it to as to what it's going to look like. So you just have to remember. So see, this is kind of a brownish red on top of this yellow with linear burn, turns out to be kind of a brown. So again, if I change that to center, it just does the opposite. Go back to edge, change it to precise. So all of these little things are going to make little differences. That didn't make much. There we go. Just took it a minute. I tend to like the softer myself, but it just depends on what you want. Choke, if I turn the choke up, it's going to harden it just a little bit, and then bring the size up a little bit more. Yeah, it's really delayed here for some reason. So anyway, then again, you got the quality down here. If I change the range, bring the range up a little bit, now I've got bigger to come up with something like that. So it's just, again, playing around with it. But if you know what all of these things do, it makes it a little easier to know what to expect. So then we go over here to our goddess. I called her a goddess in this because that's what she is in the composite. And I'm going to take this and throw it away. And we're going to come back and do this as an inner glow. And the inner glow, we're going to try to make it more of a yellow color down there. Blending with screen, there we go. So now we have more of a yellow color there. And if I bring the opacity down, whoops, too much. Get a little bit in there. So we're going to be in here like this. So now see the difference between this and the inner shadow is that it's everywhere. So I would have to come in here and do that little trick I showed you with stroke, where I would copy her over and change that flag in there to be able to paint away the other side over here where I don't want this glow. But it's a really nice look that you can do around the edges. Now obviously this cutout is not even close to being a final like cutout. It's just kind of early in the stages. But I wanted to use it to kind of show you how this works. So to me, I would use the inner shadow if I wanted to do something like this, unless she's backlit, and then I can use the inner glow, and it would give everything. So anyway, that is the inner glow. Any comments, questions, suggestions? Okay. Next. What is next? Satin. Okay, satin is one of those things that it's kind of hard for me to see. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. Throw this away and then throw this away. It gives it kind of it's supposed to give it kind of a glassy, metal, silvery, satin look. So you have to kind of really play with it to get that. You don't have much here to work with. You have the blend mode, the opacity, the angle, distance, and size, things that we've talked about with the others. It's the same thing here. We have a multiply blend mode here, and we have a very dark, I don't know if that's black, it may be black, but we have a 90-degree angle on this, and I can push the distance here and the size, and it basically is supposed to give us kind of a satiny, glowy, I don't know what you would call it, look. But you can turn that to give you a little bit more. We can kind of make it a little deeper, a little bit lighter to kind of get that look that we're looking for. Maybe a little bit bigger in size, but it's kind of hard to see how it works here. Let's go over to, and then you have the same thing down here, the contour with anti-alias and invert. So it's inverted, and then you have this, maybe that's why. So this looks a little bit more like satin. So it's not inverted now, and you have your light color on the inside, dark, and it kind of fades away. So it's supposed to look kind of like satin. And that's why they call it satin, right? And I can change the opacity and make it even darker, give it a little bit more of a hard color look, and give it that shine that makes it look kind of like satin. So that kind of looks like a satin sheet, right? Satin pillow or something. So let's try with text. Throw this away. And we'll go to satin. And again, we have a dark color here, and maybe I want to pull it down this way, maybe a little bit. Oh, that's way too dark. And it's inverted, so let's turn it this way. Maybe a little bit more distance. Now there we go. Doesn't that look like some satin that's being pushed out?
Yeah, that gives it kind of an interesting look.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a satin metallic.
Yeah.
Finish or something.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like that.
So anyway, that's how. What's that?
It's like those birthday balloons.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, and you can't, I don't have an image, a use for it on images though. It's basically, I mean, I wouldn't put it on her, give her a satin look. But it looks, I mean, it can be used for shapes or letters quite a bit. Now remember, and we're going to go over this probably in the last one where we do layer styles, you can use a lot of these together. And we're going to go through some, on the very last one, we're going to go through some ways to create things and using some of these all together. So, you don't use these necessarily just by themselves. You use them kind of all together with other things. So, any questions on satin? That one went really quick.
Well, that was my favorite one so far.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool.
I'm making a
Right.
little world. I'm making a little world over here. I've got a galaxy, a minor galaxy started.
Oh, okay. Uh, all right. Now we're going to go over color overlay. And color overlay is basically blending one color on top of another. So it's pretty much the same as if you added a solid color adjustment layer and then used a blend mode to blend it. So if I did this, I hope this works because I didn't practice this, but if I did a solid color adjustment of, let's say, green on top of here, just a kind of that kind of a green, and then I did a blend mode, oh, let's say color dodge. Now I'd want to have this, oops, I'd want to have this clipped to this layer so it doesn't affect the other green. So now what it's done is it's blended this green with this blue, and it's come up with this light blue using color dodge. So I should be able to do the same thing over here with color overlay using color dodge and using that green. I don't know what green that is. It's something like that. Oops. Maybe in here, something like that. And at 100%, I get almost the same color. So basically, color dodge is nothing more, or excuse me, color overlay is nothing more than just blending two colors together. It's mainly used, for me anyway, with composites to make the object that I am adding closer to the white balance or the colors of the background. And this was something that Richard Sturdivant taught us in his class, is one of the ways that he blends his images together. So if we'll do it with text just to be complete here. But again, it's just blending two colors together. And do it with linear burn. So basically you're blending this kind of a pink color, this yellow color, linear burn, and we're getting this kind of a deep yellow color. But if I take, let's see, I'm going to use a different one here because she's so yellow. I'm going to turn her off, and we're going to come over here and get this girl. And we're going to, move her over here. Okay, so now you've got her in here. And I would use color overlay to come in here and blend her in to look a little bit more like she belongs here. Now, this is way wrong, linear burn. I typically use soft light, but I'll take, and I'll just come in here and sample the color depending on what I want her to be most like. So is it blue? Blue's not too far off. If I do this, that's too much. It's way too much, and that's way too much, and that's way too much. So it's kind of the blue that I'm looking for, because she's kind of going into the nighttime with the sun going down here. So, and I have it on soft light, so I could actually bring it down if it's too much blue. So it's not much different than if I added a solid color adjustment, clipped it to that layer, and then moved the opacity down. Almost the same, or change the blend mode to soft light and then played with the opacity. So you can see that she's very close, or much more, I should say. Maybe she's not close enough, and I might make some more changes. But she's pretty close to, much closer to the background, fitting into the background than what she did before. So if I take this and turn off the effect, see she's a lot more, well, she was shot in studio with flashes, so she looks like it right there. If I turn this on, then she looks a little bit more like she may have been there. Now I would do more, of course, to blend her in, but that's the start. And that's how I use color overlay more than anything, because it just takes the place of, like I say, those other steps of adding a solid color adjustment and then blending it in. So any questions on color overlay? That was an easy one, actually. It's pretty simple. Okay. What else do we have? That's all I was going to talk about for that. So I want to talk about just a couple of other things since we have so much time left. And I want to talk about two other things, kind of like bonus. First, is there any question on any layer styles before I move on? Comments or anything? I'll give you a second while I refill my glass.
Oh my. I can see some use for these.
They're pretty cool, and once you get a combination that you really like, you can save these layer styles and reuse them. So in fact, there's a
Saw that.
styles right here. You can open this styles, and this is where you can save your styles. So, and here's some that are come seated, but you can save your styles in here, then you can go back and reference them anytime. So pretty cool. And next time, go ahead.
Oh, that one, the what's it called? Color overlay. I would have created a second layer and filled it with, well, filled it with this very, very like a 5% something, and or maybe filled it with an opaque color, but then brought the opacity down to like 5 or 10%, and that works too.
Yeah, it's like anything else. There's definitely more than one way to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Okay. Next time we're going to talk about the rest of these, the gradient overlay, which I use a lot on text, and it's really cool. Pattern overlay I've never used. We'll talk about outer glow and drop shadow, but we'll talk about pattern overlay. It's probably a cool tool. There's just, certain things they're really cool. I just don't use them. I don't find a use for them. And I'm sure pattern or overlay is one of those things. But we'll finish up next week with these four. And then the following time, I don't mean next week, but next time. And then the following time, we will spend some time on, carving into wood and creating text and things like that with a combination of some of these. And I'll kind of give you some thoughts on ways to create some really cool stuff. And then we'll be done with layer styles. Okay? So what I wanted to do is spend just a couple of minutes and talk about something other than color overlay to make this work, and that is correcting the white balance or matching the white balance on these two. And there are some different rules of thought about how to do that, but one of the ways that I thought really works really well for me is, I'm gonna throw this away so it doesn't get in the way, is to use a curves layer, and basically using the curves layer, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to select the white points and dark points and match them to her. So the way to do that, and I hope I don't stick my foot in my mouth. Oops, that's not what I wanted. This is what I wanted. Right here. So you have these eyedroppers up here, and we're going to go, this is your black point, this is your white point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and click here. First of all, I'm going to clip this because I want this curve to only affect her. But I'm going to go with the black point first. So I'm going to click and I'm going to select the darkest part of the background, which to me is up here. So I'm going to click there. Notice it affects her. Now I'm going to go into her and I'm going to click the darkest part of the image on her. And I think that's probably right here in this hair. So I'm going to click there and it makes another adjustment. Then I'm going to go to my white point and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come in, I think probably right in here is the whitest part of this image. One of these, this yellow is. So I'm just going to try it right in here. Okay. And now I come into her and I click the whitest part of the image. It's probably going to be just about anywhere on this gown here, but I'm going to click right here. And this, you notice if you look at the curves layer that I have adjustments here for the different channels. Now, this is supposed to, now if I had a gray point, you know, middle gray, and middle gray to me is the hardest one to select. What I could do is I could come in here and open my info panel and look for somewhere around 128, a mid-tone somewhere in here around 128, and it's going to be very hard to find because you can see that that's 163, 111, and 124. So there's really, it's biased by red. So there's really not a neutral in here that is close to being equal. This is 118, 106, and 121. It's not too far off, but you're not going to find something. It'd be ideal if I could find a midpoint. So I'm going to skip the midpoint, and that would be your next thing to do. So now she is supposedly close to the white color or the white balance of the background. For me, I think she needs to have a little bit of adjustment in her tones. So I think she's, we're going to click this one too. We're going to darken her up a little bit, and then we're going to raise some of that. So that gives her a little bit better tones, I think. Now I could have done a brightness and contrast adjustment layer, but I typically use curves. So that is a way to try to get the white balance equal. Did it do the good job? Well, I don't know. I kind of think she needs to be probably a little more blue or a little more pink. But and if I think that, there's no reason why I can't adjust it. So I would come in here and again do a color overlay and probably come down here and maybe add the blue and give her a little bit of a blue tint too. So I mean, you could do both of those and supposedly adjust that white balance where it's equal. I don't think she still is there yet. So I may want to push the blue up a little bit more, but personal taste. So that's kind of a technique for getting them close to the color of the background. Maybe I wanted, you could actually have two color overlays in there too. So I could come in here and add a second color overlay. And maybe in this one, I want it to be a little bit pink. So I have a little bit of blue and a little bit of pink. And those two together maybe are close to the background. So now I have two color overlays in there. If I turn it off, see it goes to there. And she's a little brighter there. So I could actually take the curves layer here, oops, and make it a little bit darker. So anyway, it just goes on and on. That's kind of the way I approach it though. Try to get her in the same colors and blend her. Then in addition to that, I can always add a lookup table on top of this to blend in the colors, or add a gradient overlay to blend in those two colors as well. So there's lots of different ways to get her to blend. Any comments on that? Thoughts? Suggestions? Okay. The last thing I wanted to talk about is Puppet Warp. Puppet Warp is one of those things that it sounds really cool and it works really cool, but it can get you in trouble real quick. But what I did here is I actually had two of these girls like this. One was batting left and one is batting right. They were in the poster and they were on the top row up here. And one of these girls had the bat going this way and one of them had it going this way. So I wanted to have it the same on both of them. So I used Puppet Warp to come in here and bend her wrist so that the bat is going more like this, okay? And I did this today and it was a lot more hard. It was a lot harder this time than it was the first time, but we're gonna give it a shot. And I have to do it because the bat needs to be behind her head. So I'm gonna have to kind of cut it out here. So this is gonna be a little bit of a task, but I thought I'd go through it with you anyway, just for grins, since we have some time. So I'm going to come in here with my lasso tool, and I'm going to come around, and I'm just going to cut out like this right here. Okay. So with Command J, it cuts it out. You can see over here on the layers panel that if I turn that off, that's what I have right there, and that's what I want to look at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a smart object here. I sure hope this works. And then I'm going to do Edit, Puppet Warp. Okay, now it creates a mesh across here. And you have some options up here. If you want to have more what do you call it, more dense of a mesh, you can push this up, I think. Yeah, there we go. And get more points. You can turn the mesh off, turn it on. So there's a couple of things up here, pin depth and some other things that I really don't use. But basically what you want to do is create an anchor right here with the wrist, and you want to be able to push all of this stuff to the left and have it pivot from the wrist. So we're going to look at this a few ways. So I'm going to click right here to give it a pin. That creates a pin right there. I want that to be my pivot point. But if I do, everything's going to turn, including her hands down here. So I need to anchor these so they don't move. So I'm going to put some pins down there. So now when I move this up here, this is going to stay where it is. And I probably want the same kind of thing here. So I'm going to anchor those. So now this right here should be the only thing that really moves. Let's see if that's the case. So I'm going to create a point right here. And if I grab that and pull it, okay, it's actually creating a bend here. So that's not what I wanted. Probably, let me try it right here. If I pull that, oh, I still got that pin up there, sorry. Delete that pin. And I'm going to pull this here because I want that to be behind her head. Now I have, what I had earlier today was I had a curve here where this was way back here. So I want to make sure that this pulls out. So I'm going to put a pin here. I'll try to pull that out a little bit so that it stays along with that. Okay, so now I have this behind her head, and that's pretty straight. So now I'm going to hit enter. Okay, so if I turn her back on, now I have this bat behind her head. So what I'm going to have to do is go in and erase this original selection. So we're going to come in here, and I'm going to erase this original selection right here. Pretty cool, huh? This is how you create things that don't exist. So typically what I would do, and I see she's got her fingers already, so I don't have to worry about that. Erase that. Oops. Yeah, right there. Okay. So now, let's see. Oops. Okay, I've got that on the bat that I want to get rid of. So right here, I want to get rid of that hair. This mask. Whoops. Whoops, whoops, whoops. A mask. Sometimes with my pen, it's harder to select. Okay, so I'm going to come in here. It's easier for me to paint this way, so I'm going to come in here and get rid of this little bit of hair. And I don't need to be careful because I want to get rid of this whole bat. So I'm going to get rid of this like this. And just kind of create it around her hair there. There we go. And then on this original, you get rid of this little bit right here. Okay. And there's a little bit more of the bat there that I need to get rid of. Right there. So there we go. So now she has the bat behind her head. And all I did was pivot it off of this wrist right here and turn it so that it looks like it's more behind her head. So pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
So.
No, that one's pretty nice.
It never occurred to me to mark a selection for puppet warp. I've always put anchors all over the dang place.
Oh.
Oh well. Mark me dummy.
No, none at all. I got to tell you that I went to do it today, and I was doing it with a basketball player who has arms out like spread eagle, and he's holding the balls out there, and I want his arms down. And I never could get it to work, typically because puppet warp is very good for doing subtle differences like this. When you get into big changes, it really doesn't work very well. So little changes like this, and I did this so that they would be looking like bookends, on this poster. So they're actually about 4 people in between them, but they were at the same position on each end of the poster, and I wanted them to look the same rather than one of them having the bat up in the air and one of them having it back. So, it took me about 10 minutes to do it, and it was pretty simple to do. But that basketball player, I was going crazy nuts trying to get it, and I never could get it to work. Because you get some of these guys, some of these images are for a banner, and like this banner is this kind of a ratio. It's really skinny. It's 3 feet by 5 feet. And if they have their arms out like this, they're going to have to be tiny in order to get their arms in there, where everybody else is going to be big. And you don't really want that. So I was trying to pivot on his shoulder and move his arm in. And if you're not careful when you do that puppet warp, you can stretch their arms out. You can push their arms in. It's just like liquefy. It's just all over the place. So you have to be really careful. But it's a really cool tool if you use it sparingly. So kind of neat. Any questions on puppet warp?
Oh, I just have a statement. I'm
Yeah.
impressed. And now I'm not going to believe any photo I ever see.
Well, that's kind of the way it is, though. I mean, if you look at that, if you look at images on Facebook and you look at some of the really, really epic, cool images, I guarantee you that they didn't shoot them that way. There's a lot of artwork going on in there, and I'm not saying that doesn't make them amazing images, because they're all amazing. But there is so much that goes on at the computer to help make those amazing images. I would almost guarantee you that very few of those don't go through a lot of phases of improvement. So, I mean, I'm not saying that they composite like this, but there's a lot of stuff that goes on there. Like the removing distractions, that first thing I showed you guys how to do. I always remove distractions in my images if I can. And I know a lot of people don't, but I almost always do before I show them to anybody, because I am one of those kind of photographers that really screws up almost every time and shows, you know, a tree coming out of somebody's head, or, you know, lines going across the middle of the image or something like that. And I don't want you to know that unless I tell you. So I go in there and try to fix it.
Do you have a film of that lesson? I think that was before I started with
Yes,
removing.
all of these are on video, and that's one of the first ones. It's called Removing Distractions. I think there's 2 of them actually. And I went in, that was before we were doing these online things, and I would go in on my own and create a video. So the first several are like that, and some are short, some are long. I think those are about 45 minutes each, something like that.
Content-aware Phil has become a personal friend.
Yep.
I like
So,
the patch.
what's that?
I like the patch tool too, but it's pretty limited in what it can do.
Yeah, there's, I don't use the patch tool very much. I use primarily the clone tool and the spot healing brush, or the healing brush, not the spot healing brush. I use the healing brush because I can select where I want it. But those are the 2 I use the most of the time. And,
Yeah, well, me
you know,
too, because they've been there forever.
yeah, and they're simple to use. The only thing is I haven't mastered how to clone around a curve. And I know you can do that because there is a panel for it. I've just never.
Clone around a curve.
Yeah, let's say you have a fender of a car, and you have a distraction that's on the other side of that fender that you want to get rid of.
Yeah.
So you want to clone that distraction away.
Yeah.
And as you go around that curve, that clone doesn't necessarily go around the curve with you. Or you want to, let's say you want to clone the edge of that fender down around that curve where the headlight is. You can do that if you use the curve tool for the clone. It's not the curves adjustment, of course, but there is a tool where you can, I think you push like the left arrow key or the right arrow key or something like that, and you tell it what degree you want it to curve.
Oh my gosh.
And so, yeah, it's not as easy as it sounds, but
I would make a selection of what I wanted to. I would make a selection.
I've lived without it all these years.
So Bob, so today I was playing with trying to do a composite of, I went out Robin and Marty and I went out last night, and I found this church and I had this vision. Well, of course, there was too many trees. It wasn't going to work. But, we're like, well, we could do a composite. And Marty did a pretty good one. So I was playing with one of mine today. And I was trying to take the power lines off the church. And I was doing the spot healing brush or the clone. I can't remember. And it was like, it was doing really good. And then it got to a certain point and it started cloning from below instead of beside it.
It does that.
I mean, is there any way to tell it, okay, I want to clone from this area? I tried different selections.
Oh, you were cloning?
What makes it start doing that?
You were cloning or healing?
I was doing both tools. I was trying both tools.
Well, the clone it's artificial intelligence. It's not real intelligence.
Kind of like me.
No, like me. The clone though, it just paints whatever you said paint.
It decides what it thinks you want to clone, and it does that.
No, the healing does that.
Were you driving?
Okay, wait a minute. There are 3 tools there. There's the clone tool, and the clone copies pixel for pixel. Okay.
Yeah.
The spot healing brush finds a place that it thinks you want to clone from, and it chooses. The healing brush, you select the area that you want it to blend from.
Yeah, I think it was the spot healing brush, because I found that was working better, because it was like, church siding kind of a thing. and the wires. And so I was using that, and it was like basically replacing the section with the wire running vertical, and it was replacing it with the horizontal lines. And then I got to a smaller area, and it started replacing it with stuff from below rather than beside it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
it was like,
Okay, well,
got so far, but then it just went berserk.
if you're using the spot healing brush, it works kind of like the spot healing brush in Lightroom. It selects an area that it thinks is close to what you want to replace it with. If you use the healing brush, you make a selection, but it doesn't work the same way that the clone tool does, in that if you let up, it goes back to your original position, or you're back to your original selection of where you're wanting to blend from. So in other words,
Okay.
let me see if I can show
Yeah,
you
it
what
was
I'm
just,
talking
it was
about.
frustrating because it was like it did so well, and then all of a sudden it just went to hell. You know? And then I was like, oh hell, just leave the damn light, the wires in there and deal with, you know, because they were there, you know.
Okay, let me kind of give you what I'm talking about. So if we go to J is the shortcut key for those tools. So if I come over here to the toolbar and open it, come on toolbar. Oh, there we go. You have the healing brush is selected, because that's what I almost always use. The spot healing brush, the spot healing brush selects for you. But if you use the healing brush, what I was trying to say is, if I'm cloning, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not.
Yeah.
Okay, you can see it. So I'm selecting right here, okay? And then I'm gonna come along here like this, and I'm copying. And if I let up, and then I start to copy again, see where the cursor is? See where the selection comes from?
Yes.
It comes from back over here again. So if you let up, you're gonna have to do another selection.
Yeah, and I was reselecting new areas that would match what was beside it, but it just was doing weird stuff, and I finally just said, just stop right now. Don't go any further. But it was like in certain areas, it was like perfect. I mean, if you zoomed in, yeah, you could probably see it, but you know, zoomed out at a regular observance, it looked okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just started, and it was more of a narrow area. The other one worked fine, where it was like, you know, a wide area of the sideboards that were, you know, I was trying to replace with. But then when it got to this narrow area, it just was not working right.
Okay.
I did a go at that too, Chris, and I wound up with something that's kind of funny looking, fun looking, but
Yeah.
I figured I'd just keep it for myself, because there's already one out there.
Well, I wanted to, you know, we talked about it, and I was like, how did Marty get that composite so fast? You know, it looks so good. And
I use color select to get the sky out, but then I had to do a whole bunch of cloning to get the edges.
yeah, and that's you know, I was playing with I'm trying to like just learn different things and play with different things, and I need to go back in there and try doing the blend if with the color or something and see what I get. But it was just like I say, that I tried the healing brush, the spot healing brush, and the clone tool, you know, to see, okay, which is going to work best. And they all worked well to a certain point. And then I started having this problem with this particular area. And I don't know if it's just, you know, it's because it's a much smaller area or what, but.
Another thing you can do, Chris, is you can clone our blend at a lower opacity. So you can
Oh, okay.
I always bring in an extra layer, you know, just to separate it, and then I can come in and blend it, and I can lower the opacity to remove any kind of artifacts that may show up as well. So you could try that, or
Yeah, it was just, it's, you know, like I say, I'm just trying to learn stuff and playing with
Sure.
different things. And I'll watch a video, you know, some of it's your videos, some of it's the ones that are out on Photoshop's
sure.
site. And it's like, well, why isn't this doing what I wanted to do?
That was my frustration in the beginning too, is that I'd watch a video and then I'd try it and I'd go, well, it doesn't work. I can't get
Well,
it to
and
do what they
especially
do.
when it's like, well, it worked for this last batch here. It worked perfectly. And then all of a sudden, no, I'm not going to work anymore. I'm going to start choosing from below. And so I was like, no, that's not what I want. I want it from the side. So,
You know what you were doing there, Bob, when you were showing her is interesting. I've always kind of cleaned up my edges of an extract like that with the blur brush, but that's an interesting thing. Maybe heal it instead of blur it.
Well, I do it differently. I do
Yeah.
my extraction. Whenever I do it, I do select and then modify, which I don't have a selection made, and then feather, and that feathers it pretty good. And I do that, and then I'll come in and maybe I used to use the blur tool. Richard taught us how to use the art. Was it the kind of brush is that?
What?
The mixer brush. The mixer brush. Taught us how to
Oh
use
my
the mixer
gosh.
brush and go around and just soften the edges. Now, I don't use that much anymore except on the hair. I'll use that on the hair because it blends it in really well. But smudge tool or the blur tool also do exactly the same thing. But I've found that whenever I do the extraction, if I do a feather and do a feather of maybe 2 to 3 pixels,
Mhm.
it really softens that edge, and you can you know, go back if that's too soft or not soft enough and make some adjustments too. So I typically don't do that around, like I wouldn't do it around her dress here, um, especially until I was sure I was getting close to the end, because I may cover this all up with something else in the image.
Mm-hmm.
But I would definitely do it around the hair. So I would do some kind of smudge or some kind of blend around the hair. And the hair in this case, you can see
Got a
she was,
halo.
yeah, she was cut out against a white background. So she's got a
Make
halo.
aberration.
Yeah, she's got a halo anyway because she's an angel. But
No, but it doesn't look like Angel.
that's right.
wrong kind of halo.
Yeah.
But I would definitely get rid of that. And there's several ways to get rid of that too that are really cool. And what I would do about that is, let me just show you, for example, I would add a blank layer and I would come in here, and she is a transparency. Actually, maybe it would be better to do it on her. It would be better. So let me drag this down. I would go to her and I would come in here and say protect transparency. Okay, so now I can come in here and I can either use my clone tool and clone this blue down here, or I could use the brown and paint over it with brown. So there's different ways that you could do that. I would probably come in here though with the clone stamp tool and just do a selection right here and just come in here and just kind of paint that away like that.
Oh, wow. Do what? Stop. What? Whoa.
You could also,
Uh-oh, it went too far.
I need to know this.
You could also come in here and choose darker color. I believe it's darker color. I always get those backwards. Darker color, which means that you only want to clone over it if it's darker. So if I come in here and make a selection here, I can just paint like this and not really worry too much about getting her hair. So it's pretty cool.
Hey, you're working on that layer. There's a white background on that layer, but you see blue. Oh, the blue comes from, how did you get? Yeah.
So I'm on her and she is she's on the transparency.
Right.
If I turn off the background, this is what you see. So with that background, now I can come in there, and like I said, I'm cloning, but you could do this with paint as well, but I'm cloning and I'm saying I only want to clone over whatever is lighter, or if it's darker color. So if the color is darker than what I'm cloning over. So I come here, I have to be careful because this is pretty light, but I come down here and I don't have to be as careful getting rid of that.
Where'd you find that? Where'd you find that?
Where did I find it?
I'm not, yeah, I missed that.
Okay, the darker color. I'm using the clone stamp tool,
Yeah.
and I'm selecting the blend mode for the clone stamp tool, the darker color. So it's the blend mode on the clone stamp tool. And I'm cloning around it. Now, if you turn off the background, you'll see where I've cloned. I've cloned that blue down there.
That's why I come to Ace Soirees, Bob.
Just a little trick. There's lots of those little things in my toolbox that I do.
Oh crap! Chromatic aberration. I don't care. Buy the cheap lenses. Good gosh.
So, little tricks.
So Bob, did you figure a lot of this stuff just out by yourself, just playing around with it, or did you take classes and then build from there? I mean, like these little tricks, where did you originally get them?
They're things little nuggets I've picked up here and there.
Okay. So you're not that smart. You just picked up stuff from other people.
Well, I'm definitely not that smart. That's for sure. Yeah, this is something that you heard me say this before, but I picked it up from Richard Sturdivant. I learned so much in that class. And this is one of those things. You know, I went into that class knowing how to do a lot of things, but there were certain things that I was struggling with. And whenever he came across those, I go, there's a nugget. And I recorded that, and I remember it because it was something that I was having trouble with, and it allowed me to use his technique. And now there are some techniques that I used to follow of his that I've changed because I've found different ways to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like with everything computer driven, there's 15 ways to accomplish the same result. Right. It's whatever you learn and whatever you figure out and what works for you.
Right. And I pick up things from videos. I pick up things. Sometimes it's things that I stumble across myself. Mm-hmm. And like, there are some of these very, very accomplished folks that do things that I'm going, why are they doing it that way? You can do it so much easier, a different way. And I do it my way rather than doing it their way. So, I mean, it's, a lot of these folks have been out there using Photoshop for 20 years and they haven't changed. They don't know that there's a better way to do some of this stuff. And so they continue to do it the same old way. And I'm probably following into the same pattern because there are things that I do that somebody else would come along and say, why are you doing it that way? So, it's just
that thing you taught us about using the curves layer for doing dodging and burning. I've really played around with that a lot, and it was like, I think you showed us like 3 or 4 different ways to do it, but that was the way you said was easiest. And I think somebody else had pointed out, well, check this guy's thing. And I was like, yeah, that's what Bob taught us. And it does seem to work. It's easy to do, and it seems to be effective.
Yeah, there's, people swear by different ways, and I, for the longest time, did it the way Richard did it. He taught us, and I don't do it that way anymore. I do the curves, just like you said. That's my way of doing it now.
The dodge and burn brushes are just useless. I mean, to me.
Good. Yeah. I have an action that does it. Right. Right here, retouching, dodge and burn curves right there. So I just click that and it creates my layers for me.
Mm-hmm. Good idea.
Yeah, I played around with it and it's like, okay, is it really doing anything? And then you click that layer off and you're like, oh yes, it really is, even though it's so subtle. but it
Yeah.
makes such a difference when you turn it off and you see the changes.
Yeah, it does. And I was just I'm still working on my stuff for Missouri, believe it or not. But I was working on some pictures a couple of days ago, and I'm moving along with my dodging and burning, and I look over at my mask and I go, is anything happening?
Yeah.
And because sometimes, it's not, because I've screwed up. But I look over there and I go, well, let me see. And I turn it off and on and I go, oh, okay. Yeah, I guess it is. So, yeah. And then when you're done, it makes such a difference.
Yeah,
when
it's
you're done.
like I say, it's very subtle in a lot of ways, but boy, you could really tell it when you turn it off and on.
Yep. Yep. Well, cool. I'm glad you're doing it.
Yeah.
So
all is
anything
not
else?
lost on us, Bob.
That's okay.
Some of
I
it
know
is, but not all of it.
you're probably just doing this so I'm not talking to myself, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, like I said, next time we will finish up on the layer styles, and then the time after that, we'll go through some techniques on using these layer styles and how they can be useful to you, primarily with text and using it with objects as well. So, and I'll try to find some other nuggets like this puppet warp and stuff like that to kind of throw in, because I have a feeling that we'll be done pretty quick next time, because these layer styles are pretty much, it's the same kind of stuff, just it does a little something just a little different to make a difference. So like the inner glow and the inner shadow are almost identical. So little things like that. And think about those when you're doing your next composite. Add some light in there, whichever direction the light's coming from. It could make a big difference.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Thank
You
you.
bet.
Later.
Time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Right.
Night.
Take care, Joy.